What is so unique about Einstein's brain? What's so unique about whatever brain?
Well, I think it's actually a reasonably a good topic. Never gave permission for them to actually do the study of his brain. He had asked to be cremated. So the removal of his brain and the dissection of his brain and all that was, well, uh, uh,
the,
it was a
the,
bold move, shall we say. And
yeah, they ripped off his brain.
yeah, in 1955, there weren't really the levels of IRB
Yeah,
oversight and things like
yeah,
that. And, doctors were gods and they did what the freak they wanted. And
yeah,
this is an image, not a terribly good image, but an
yeah,
image of Einstein's brain. And, unless you're kind of familiar with brains, this looks just like a pile of intestines or a stack of
yeah,
ropes or something. What the hell are we looking at? How do you know this is different from something else? And there are some things that are kind of expected. If you've seen enough brains, you can kind of see the differences that are present here. I wouldn't expect most people to have that kind of experience. So, you show the picture and everybody goes, oh, ick, a human brain, if you know brains well, there's a few things that you can see just right in front of you that are not neurotypical. But everybody's brain is unique. They don't come color coded. You don't have a neurosurgeon that can trust when they take a little piece off to look at a cortex that they know exactly what the cortex they're looking at is doing. So they actually have to test those things before they do surgery. Everybody's slightly different. And
mhm.
everybody's kind of morphed into an idealized brain, the Montreal brain or something, but they're all different. Now, the things that stand out to me here are, see this knob?
We got some Patreon love to dish out. We are supported by listeners and businesses just like you, like our gold supporter, Applied Neuroscience Incorporated, the creators of NeuroGuide, the premier EEG assessment and training software whose demo version can be downloaded from the link here. Hey, check it out. Applied Neuroscience is having a workshop September 10th and 11th in Florida, Madera Beach, Florida. Hey, two ways you can participate. You can attend the workshop, or you can do it remotely through TeamViewer, or click on the link here, appliedneuroscience.com/attend-ng-workshops. Hey, check it out. Dr. Thatcher is inviting everybody that attends to his house for a cookout. Sign up now. It's gonna be a blast. Woohoo! If you have any questions, email qeeg@appliedneuroscience.com. Join us. Hey, thanks to our silver supporters, Mary Tracy's awesome QEEG training program at eegstrategies.com and Mind Media's Nexus EEG amplifier. Welcome aboard, Erwin. They're at mindmedia.com. Yeah.
This is the motor strip, and this is basically the hand area.
Is that the left side?
For this is the left brain. Everybody sees the left brain, the right brain is underutilized or underappreciated
Yeah, yeah.
somehow in graphics. But this knob is not neurotypical. Now, Einstein from early years was into violin, and there are those that hypothesize that this is essentially hypertrophy due to the intense and extended years doing violin. It's an interesting theory. Might be true. Might be just a little bumpy anomaly. This is it. This borders on phrenology. You know, oh, a bump where the hand was. So the theories that come about from the morphological differences are interesting theories, but you've got to take them with a salt block. And you're from the Midwest. You know what a salt block is. Salt lick. This is not a dash of salt. You could get hurt dropping one of these things on your foot. So we have to be almost laughing at our gross conclusions here. The other thing is, you'll notice that there's the operculum, the kind of cap over top of the insula. Where the hell is it? It isn't. It's a missing piece. It might account for the fact that his brain was actually not in grams, even close to being a normal size. It was about 1,250 grams. 1,400 is kind of the average. So, maybe the missing operculum is it. That's where all the weight went. I don't know. Silvian Fissure this is kind of one of those idealized brains. You notice that it doesn't look the same, but that normally the Silvian Fissure wraps up in the temporal lobe. The motor strip comes down to it, and it goes up into the parietal area, and it goes up fairly far. The auditory cortex being enfolded into the temporal parietal junction. So, what the hell is this? It goes ka-clunk. It's truncated instead of going the rest of the way. This excessive left parietal area is hypothesized to be the reason that he had excessively good sensory integration. He could integrate images, and he thought in images basically. Some people just
thought experiments, right?
Yeah, and he thought in literally visual images. His thought experiments were things you could imagine. You could kind of see them, light bending around a star. Anyway,
imagining you're on a train going past the clock at the speed of light, and
where the hell the rest of the Silvian Fissure go? So there's some structural changes here. This is not neurotypical, but not everything was as easily seen. And again, no permission. The differences are in structure. I think, we kind of do a certain amount of phrenology based on the bumps and so forth. And I think to a certain extent, if this were looked at with modern neuroscience tools for connectivity and things like that, that would be an interesting study. What we've got here is almost a laughable level of a study. This is a kick the tires level of mechanical testing of a car. Not there's no depth to this. This is all kind of gross. Now, again, smaller brain. It had a real thick corpus callosum, so an increased connectivity between the hemispheres. In fact, his corpus callosum was almost female-like. Females have big, well-developed corpus callosums. Males should have callosal envy. We've got a dramatic difference male to female, and some males are more female-like and some females are more male-like in their structures. But he had a thick corpus callosum, and again, compared to the average, and you have to remember 1955, most of the studies were done on males. So male and female to be in studies, So he had an excessively connected compared to the average of the males that they had seen. So again, this may have been a female like corpus callosum, increased connectivity between hemispheres. Again, the insula wasn't covered. The cap, the small cap over top of the insula just wasn't there. And I don't see a whole bunch of people hypothesizing what kind of a deficit it caused him to be missing his operculum. On the right side, for instance, the frontal lobe, the cap portion that sticks over top of it, that very lateral frontal area, ends up being involved in inhibiting expression and impulses. On the left side, it has to do with distractibility. I don't know. So, are we saying he was a distractible, impulsive person? I don't think so.
Oh,
So,
he was with the ladies.
well, that like that's not common. The left motor strip. Again, they had the knob that I showed in the image, and again, that's the knob, and you don't usually see a big knob sticking up in the motor strip. So that's an anomaly. The left hippocampus. The hippocampus is it's part of the limbic system. It's attached to and involved with the amygdala, but it's more of a memory processor, and the amygdala is more of an emotional processor. Although they're so tightly intertwined, historically, the stimulation studies and the ablation studies ended up giving symptoms out of the other nuclear body. The separation of their function, that took quite a bit of time. They're functionally intertwined. But the hippocampus is, again, largely a memory processor. And his left hippocampus is larger, and the nerve cells were disproportionately sized. They were large. So, probably some enhanced memory. He did report basically using visual imagery largely, and these areas, Silvian Fissure's excessive parietal area being developed, probably assisted in some of that. But again, it'd be interesting if we had fMRI and SPECT scan and the more detailed studies. And unfortunately, his brain was, after it was imaged, it was cut up largely into about 1 centimeter squares, and some were sent around, but most of them were hauled around by the person who did the original dissection until the 1970s, when he kind of donated it to a university. At that point, it's been studied more. And one of the things that's been studied more was actually the detailed studies of the glia. You have to think back at the time of the original dissection, glia weren't really appreciated in the way they are now. They were scaffolding that the nerves could hang on. It kind of helped with the structure of the brain, and it provided some metabolic support for the cells, but they didn't have the appreciation that the glia literally could initiate and turn on and off neural networks. So they were underappreciated. So only more recently were pieces from a wide variety of locations sent and studied. And with the proper stain, you can end up kind of counting the glial cells times the area that you're looking at. No matter where they looked, there was more glia than were seen in a cohort of people of basically the same age. And you have to do that because it seems that glia replicate as you age. Who knows if that might correlate with the wisdom that you get with age? But we basically saw that the glia was generally increased, but the level, how much of an increase wasn't really dramatic, except for the left parietal area, that area that had a cortex that wouldn't normally be seen, the end of the Silvian fissure that didn't exist at the end, the truncated Silvian fissure. That location had about triple the glial density that normally is seen.
Jay,
So,
if we could go back in time, and we had all the, none of this stuff came out to 20 years later, but if we could have a QEEG, what would the colors look like on a map if we had Einstein's brain? Because we're just
you can only hypothesize.
that's right. We're hypothesizing. That's right. This is
So
it's a clickbait episode. So no pride here. But what would it look like, you think?
so he didn't seem to exist in worry or fear. And I would hypothesize that he had frontal midline theta, which is not seen in everybody, but it's seen in normal memory function for memory retrieval, and obviously having a good memory would have been a benefit. But you could see it in his personality style as a lack of fear or worry, and given the era that he lived in, there was plenty of things to be fearful of and worry about.
Well, he's smart enough to get out of Germany in the 30s before it really hit the fan. But
Yeah, and but he was an extraordinarily bright guy, and so I would also hypothesize that he probably had a very fast background alpha rhythm, peaking in a significantly faster range, 12-13 hertz. Not so fast that his overarousal would have driven him to drinking to wind it down. The counterbalance to that very fast alpha is the frontal midline theta. If you don't have the frontal midline theta, having that much octane, fast alpha, not every engine can burn nitromethane without blowing up. Having the frontal midline theta kept his brain from having over activation negative side effects of anxiety and fear. And that's quite often the case with very fast alpha. The reason I would suggest that fast alpha is there is superior semantic and declarative memory function. And slow alpha is poor performance on semantic and declarative memory. And he obviously had an outstanding ability to pull facts out and reorganize them and sort them around in ways that normally weren't done. So his association cortex being extremely developed, basically, is not a surprise given kind of the skill set that he exhibited. We can only guess. I would suggest that his connectivity, because of the callosal development, would probably be atypical. He may not have been normal. How normal is it to be an Einstein? You know,
yeah,
so deviations like those that I mentioned, frontal midline theta being excessive compared to a database, and fast alpha at 12-13 being excessive compared to a database, you may end up seeing his Z scores being non-normal, not
yeah,
neurotypical. But then who wants to be normal?
yeah.
So
So Jay, when you look up these abnormal brains, you know more than I do. I'm just doing my Google searches, and you see that these brains, it was more nurture than nature, that something happened to them where they had an injury. Do you think he was born this way, or do you think something happened to him as a kid to get that little knob there? What do you think happened?
I don't know that the knob is anything. It seemed to impress some of the neuroscientists of that era, but that's it's freaking phrenology. Oh, you develop this skill, so the area in the brain swells up. It's gonna cause a bump on the head. So, nature nurture. It's always a combination of the two. You get opinions that are polar to one side or the other that are only outlier opinions. So his brain was not neurotypical. The lack of an operculum probably from the time of birth. The structure at the end of the Silvian fissure being off, probably structural. It's a unique condition, but it's probably structural from birth. It may have given him a unique ability, which he ended up using. The same person's brain put into a totally different environment may have had a totally different outcome. So nothing quite like chaos theory. A small perturbation at the beginning can give you a dramatic difference in outcome.
Now, Jay, in the history of neurofeedback, a lot of, fortunately or unfortunately, a lot of stuff that kicked it off was a lot of the bad things that went down in Germany, and he got out right before all that stuff happened. What was going down in Germany before it really hit the fan, that one doctor was doing these human experiments and whatnot to help us get going with neurofeedback?
Well, Berger was one of the people he's the one who published first about the EEG in the human. but they'd already seen brain electrical activity in animals. It was just, there was somebody that was going to do it in a human. And Berger actually a reasonably good job, not just instantly publishing his observation. He tried to prove there was some artifact or anomaly or something. So it took him almost a decade to publish. And who has this data laying around for a decade before they publish nowadays? I have an idea about a study, so I'm going to apply for publication now. He wasn't a nice guy. He was a Nazi, and although Niedermeyer and a whole bunch of others have tried to paper over his history, R. Douglas Field's book, The Electric Brain, does an honest job of looking at Berger. He did experiments like sticking thermometers into living people's brains. You don't get a volunteer for that. So I think you can see he wasn't anything other than a Nazi. He had in his diary that he was upset because there were Jews on the beach at his vacation resort, and he sat on a sterilization board even after he no longer had his position at Jenna. There have been people that tried to paper over the fact that it was a Nazi. Just face it, it was real. It wasn't the right thing to be. But again, somebody else would have found the human EEG almost immediately after his publication.
We are supported by listeners and businesses just like you, like our gold supporter, Applied Neuroscience Incorporated, the creators of NeuroGuide, the premier EEG assessment and training software, whose demo version can be downloaded from the link here. Hey, check it out. Applied Neuroscience is having a workshop September 10th and 11th in Florida, Madera Beach, Florida. Hey, two ways you can participate. You can attend the workshop, or you can do it remotely through TeamViewer, or click on the link here, appliedneuroscience.com/attend-ng-workshops. Hey, check it out. Dr. Thatcher is inviting everybody that attends to his house for a cookout. Sign up now. It's going to be a blast. Woohoo! If you have any questions, email qeeg@appliedneuroscience.com. Join us.
Adrian and Matthews in England, the group at Harvard with Gibbs and Gibbs and Lennox in Lennox's lab at Harvard, Mayo Clinic, Dr. Yeager, Charlie Yeager, MD, PhD. They all, in the very, very early 30s, they ended up with their own EEG devices. You had to build your own amp. Some of them were more well considered than others. Dr. Yeager built an amp that has a piezoelectric crystal with a pen glued on the top of it. The crystal would twist and it would give you the pen deviations of the EEG. But it was a salt crystal. And if it got too damp, it would basically melt the crystal. You can use his amplifier unless it's humid. So, but the other amplifiers ended up working well enough. People ended up having tube amplifiers that worked. Tube amps were not that easy to make work, but you could. I cut my teeth on the Grass Model 1 and Model 3. Those amplifiers were, well, it wasn't the good old days. If you wanted to start working with a patient, a couple of hours before you wanted to start working with a patient, you would turn on the instrument. But before you turn it on, you'd take all the pens off the mounts. And then you would turn it on because the pens, if they crisscross and then snap apart, the tip of them has a little sapphire tip, and then it'll shatter the tip, so you ruin your pens. The amplifiers were not temperature stable for about an hour and a half or so. And at about an hour and a half, once you saw that the pen twisting the post that the pens would be on wasn't twisting back and forth a lot, you would then remount the pens, and then you had to set the length of the pen and center it, and then run calibrations and adjust the preamp's amount of amplification. So you had to calibrate the instrument. And you had to do that. That was another 30, 45 minutes worth of time to get the pens mounted and everything calibrated, ready, so that the patient could be hooked up and amplified and recorded. And you had to do cals before and after the recording, because the every single channel has a slight drift during the recording. So the good old days weren't good old days. And walk into my lab in that era, and what kind of electrodes would you get? Needle electrodes. 21 needles stuck in your head, little centimeter long needles. You wonder why kids had to be sedated in order to be recorded. And how much data do you really get from an unconscious, sedated with drugs kid? You could see some gross things,
A lot of
but
blue.
yeah, it's no way to look at a functional assessment of somebody. Big epileptiform stuff, gross asymmetries, slow focuses, those kind of things you can still see. But
Jay, is it possible if Einstein were around, we had a cue on him, could you train somebody to think like Einstein, or how close could you get? How would you explain that?
there's a difference between state, which we can train, how much alpha, how much theta, all of those state things we can train. Content is a different matter. You can have the same state and not have the same content, and it's not the same. It's important to be able to achieve the state. It fosters some similar function, but the content would be how much you learned, what information you jammed in during your busy acquisition learning curve of life, and different people have different things they focus on. So a genius brain pointed at something productive, and all that's fine. The same brain could be a farmer who does fabulous work on his farm. You really can't train somebody to be the same as. And I know there are people that claim to be able to train you to be like a Zen master. You have a brain state of a Zen master, and they will train you to have the state of a Zen master. But it doesn't make you a Zen master. The content has to be acquired, not just the state.
Is it the hippocampus, Jay? If you could record, if you could get like a solid state drive backup of your hippocampus, is that because Elon Musk might be listening?
That's where you want to have the USB plug put in. The brain operates as a distributed network. How many years did people look for the locus of memory? Where was memory? Was that like here or here? They chased it all over. They couldn't find it anywhere. But what they see is that it's actually everywhere. Holographic or holonomic was Carl Pribram's word for it. And a hologram, holograms are actually interference patterns, and you can capture one on an image plate, a photographic plate. And if you break the image that's on the photographic plate in two, you have two complete images. It's not half of an image and half of an image. It's the entire image at a slightly lower resolution. The entire image is contained in every single piece of the holographic plate at a lower resolution as you get smaller pieces, but you see the entire image. It's interesting, the development of the idea of the holographic brain ended up being such a divergence from the neurophysiologists who were sticking needles into something to see it. If you couldn't stick a needle in it, it wasn't real. And the surface EEG is definitely an epiphenomenon. It's not. It doesn't reflect any kind of a reality, according to them. And here Pribram is talking about interference patterns and holographic or holonomic function. He was so far ahead of his time. He didn't actually get his career achievement, which he should have received in the 70s, when he actually achieved most of his major breakthroughs, until after 2000. I actually ran into him at the APA. I had a booth, my company. I was trying to show the APA folks EG, QEG, and neurophysiological assessments and all of that. Yeah, I was there. Cynthia Kerson was an employee of Brain Science, and she was there helping with the booth. And end of the day, it's a long day, standing up in the booth, yam, 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 yam. And, she was shocked, and she went up to a room. And I thought, well, I'm hungry. So I walked over, and there's a point in the lobby where you've got two restaurants in front of you, kind of a quick diner, or the restaurant was called Napa. It was in Orlando, but it was called Napa, and fine dining and wine and tablecloths and waiters that are yeah a towel over the arm kind of a waiter. So, and I'm thinking, well, you know, good food or fast food, good food or fast food. Now I look over and I see white hair down to the shoulders and a little sweater over the shoulders. I recognize that's Carl. And I said, Carl? And he turned around and said, Jay, what are you doing here? I said, well, I got a booth. What are you doing here? Oh, I've got this Career Achievement Award tomorrow. And I said, well, can I take you to dinner? And and he said, well, my wife is joining me. Well, I'll take you both to dinner. And I called Cynthia and said, Cynthia, Carl Pribram and Catherine Neville, who's a novelist, who's his wife. We're going to dinner at Napa. Come down and join us if you want. Zoop, she was right down. she popped in as fast as you can imagine. And we had a very nice dinner, a lovely couple, and wonderful discussions. And I actually arm wrestled Carl for the dinner bill. He was 92, 93 years old. And Cynthia whips up her iPhone and snaps a picture of Carl and I arm wrestling over the dinner bill. He
Paid.
damn near beat me. I got a torn rotator cuff and a torn bicep on my right arm. But I'm making an excuse for a 90-something-year-old guy and I arm wrestling. But it took everything I had to end up
You took
getting
him
that.
down.
And,
You took him
and it
down.
hurt. It wasn't this. He's a tough old bird.
I'd love to have
Um,
that picture for the show, by the way.
I've probably got it very
Later,
easily
later,
here.
later, 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 later. Jay, while you're looking, we're sort of in the frequency business, aren't we? And neurofeedback deals with the slower frequencies. And Einstein, light, the speed of light, really changed everything in our world. As the frequencies pick up, isn't that where we get into gamma and higher level thinking? And oh, here we go.
And and no, I can't drink alcohol, so all of these
Yeah,
cocktails were somebody else's. So
duly noted.
anyway,
Oh, you got a good grip there. That's a good
like I said, it was
backhills
everything I
grip.
had, everything I could do to beat him. Uh, so
No, that's awesome. Yeah, awesome. So am I on track with that thinking that with the frequencies, and we're talking about Einstein, and we just recently did something on photobiomodulation. The neurofeedback is the slower frequencies, and light is the faster frequencies, and there's more to come in the learning and upper level thinking. Am I on the right track, Jay?
in fact, historically, EEG had upper limits, and the amplifier's upper limit for the database that was Roy John's database in the 70s and 80s developed the NX Link database, which is the basis for Brain DX now. And that amplifier was a Massachusetts amp, and it went up to basically just below 30 hertz, and it plummeted at that point. And Roy John quit analyzing it at 25 hertz. That was the upper limit for database for beta. More modern amplifiers have gone up to standard medical amps, which, Digital EG in the 70s finally gave full range to make it a clinical amplifier. If you didn't have the full range, it was just a research amp. But the clinical amps went up to 70 hertz, just like below 1 to 70 hertz, the medical range. But that's only up into the normal gamma at 40 hertz. And gamma 2 at 80 to 100, ripples, which are faster than that, up above 100, 125, 150. But there are even faster frequencies. The brain makes very fast frequencies. Unless you actually look at them with an amplifier, you can't really talk about them because they're invisible to you. They're not being recorded. Now, there are people that do record faster frequencies. And at this point, those can be seen. You don't expect to see power because 1 over F, the faster the frequency, the smaller the voltage. So when you get up into the 150 hertz range, you can't expect to see 100 microvolts of power. You end up having very, very, very small power. But at the same time, there are techniques like wavelet analysis that are just looking for rhythmicity, and Hilbert transforms that are just looking for rhythmicity. So you can tune them to a specific frequency. And if there's a rhythm at that frequency, it'll tell you there's a synchronous wave going on. Gert Furcheller's work with wavelets ended up being used for event-related synchronization and desynchronization, giant time frequency plots. For that kind of an analysis, you can go up to 200 hertz real easily. All you need is wavelets tuned to the frequency bands that you're interested in. That kind of an analysis is being done now. Mitzar company has their database that only goes up to 45 hertz. And the amp that it was collected on is the 201 amplifier, and that's a standard medical amp that goes to 70. So you can see the full EEG. Their 202 goes to 150 hertz. That amplifier actually allows you to see gamma 2 and ripples.
Is that the highest you can go is gamma 2 and ripples, or is there what do you think the fastest frequency is?
There are frequencies in the kilohertz range that are observed from the head, but it's probably a chemical oscillation. You can have a chemical structure that orients two likely similarly charged particles towards each other, and they'll try to escape each other. So they oscillate to try and get away from each other. Kind of like sticking the poles of a magnet together that are the same pole. That they get kind of twitchy. They don't want to get stuck together. So there are oscillations that are probably neurochemical, but as far as the waves are concerned, the very low frequency waves are an area that needs to be studied more in depth. There's some pretty good research in that area. Dr. Kropotov has done research on the about 10-second, a decasecond wave, a 10-second long wave that goes, a gold wire stuck into the brain for polarization.
What kind of thinking is going on at that fast? Is that like the reptile functions where you have to react quickly? Like what's going on?
The approximately 10-second long wave is considered an oxygenation wave. Think in terms of HRV. Heart rate variability would have you breathing how many times a second? 6 a minute. That's 10 seconds apiece. That kind of times in with the oxygenation cycle that's observed. You're matching an innate rhythm of some sort. There are those rhythms, but there are also very slower rhythms that aren't. They're not necessarily a wave that has to repeat. There's also DC field potential levels. The glia that turn on and off neural networks, for instance. How do you turn on and off a network? Well, you potentiate it by changing the polarization that it sits next to. The glia can go electropositive with calcium channels and turn things off, and electronegative with ATP and activate an area. So they can literally turn on and off neural networks, and they can do so in a millisecond or so. That was a publication by Roy John in 2005. That's basically the glial control of the neural networks and neural properties. The very slow content ends up being something that is simply potentiating something or depotentiating something. And that doesn't necessarily have a specific wave that happens. That's just neural dynamics. Your networks normally turn on and off in a dynamic way. That's going to be seen as the very low frequency and upsweep, the DC end of the spectra. When you look at the power spectra, you see that rise up at the left-hand side of the spectra. Well, that's basically the neocortical dynamics. And if you get a person who's locked in the default mode and doesn't have salience or executive function, their networks aren't dynamic, and you miss that low frequency end. The database will tell you there's a delta deficit. It's not delta, it's a slow cortical potential aspect of the delta band, which has got a few things in it, including delta rhythm, but also including slow cortical potentials. And The slow cortical potentials are a level. They're not really a rhythm. They can rise and fall and look like a rhythm. They're not driven by a pacemaker. They're basically your mind controlling your brain. Things like intention and attention and motivation. Those are all DC potentials. You can shift your intention around for motor intention. You can shift your attention, which is the intention to perceive, around. We can observe that covert movement of your intention or intention by looking at the DC field potentials. So we can kind of spy on your covert states by looking at the EEG, seeing what's going on from outside.
Jay, what do you need the gamma 2 and the ripples for and all the fast frequencies? What stuff that we don't even know could be out there? What do we need that for?
Content.
Got it.
State and content.
State and content.
De Ritter also points to gamma as carrying error messages for you as well. So
a blue screen.
Site not found.
Site not found. Bad gateway.
Yeah.
Literally.
Yep.
Jay, thank you so much for today's show. This is a good one. I was entertained. Thank you all for watching Neuro Noodles, Neurofeedback, and Neuropsychology podcast. We'd like to thank our Patreon business supporters. We are supported by listeners and businesses just like you, like our gold supporter, Applied Neuroscience Incorporated, the creators of NeuroGuide, the premier EEG assessment and training software whose demo version can be downloaded from the link here. Hey, check it out. Applied Neuroscience is having a workshop September 10th and 11th in Florida, Madera Beach, Florida. Hey, 2 ways you can participate. You can attend the workshop, or you can do it remotely through TeamViewer, or click on the link here, appliedneuroscience.com/attend-ng-workshops. Hey, check it out. Dr. Thatcher's inviting everybody that attends to his house for a cookout. Sign up now. It's going to be a blast. Woohoo! If you have any questions, email qeeg@appliedneuroscience.com. Join us. Hey, thanks to our silver supporters, Mary Tracy's awesome QEEG training program at eegstrategies.com and Mind Media's Nexus EEG amplifier. Welcome aboard, Erwin. They're at mindmedia.com. 3 things our listeners can do to help us spread the word of neurofeedback. Number 1, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Number 2, give us a review on whatever platform you listen to. 5 stars is appreciated, but Jay Gunkelman will accept 4.5. Hey, if you have the means, please support us on Patreon/NeuroNoodle. There are different levels in which you can support us, whether you're a mom or dad or a clinician. There's even an option where you can have your own Q&A with our own Jay Gunkelman. This support helps us improve the quality of our content. Hey, trying to get these video edits even better, even better. Again, we thank you all for watching. Cue the non-copyrighted music.